Today's video is sponsored by the wildly popular game Vikings War of Clans. If you've never played the game before, now is the perfect time to start because there's a new version out and it's awesome. Vikings is similar to strategy games of the 90s and 2000s, but it's available for your mobile device so you can play it anywhere. It features several exciting ways to play. You can raid cities, build fortresses, or use your diplomatic skills to rule the world. Personally, I love building up a strong defense and keeping out invaders. If you download Vikings by clicking on the links below the video, you'll not only be supporting this channel, but you'll get your initial protection shield for free and a bonus of 200 gold. So download Vikings War of Clans today and play for 5 minutes, and you'll see why me and over 10 million other players are obsessed with it. Without any further delay, here's today's video. Number 3. Isiah Fowler. April 27th, 2013 was a Saturday, and it was a warm day in Valley Springs, California. That morning, 8-year-old Layla Fowler stayed home with her brother, 12-year-old Isiah Fowler, while the rest of the family was out at a Little League game. The brother and sister apparently had a great relationship, and it was normal for Layla to stay home with her brother. At around noon, Isiah called his father and stepmother. He said that a strange man was in the house, and he ran out the back door. Isiah didn't say anything about his sister being hurt. His stepmother then called 911, and she said that an intruder had been in the house. A few minutes later, Isiah called 911 himself, while his father and stepmother raced home. A minute and a half into the call, he said that his sister had been stabbed. A paramedic arrived on the scene, and he found Layla's body on the floor of her bedroom beside her television. He noted that Layla's body was cool to the touch. The police arrived at the house and concluded that Layla had been stabbed on the top bunk of her bed. The wall beside the bed was splattered with blood. The first person that the police interviewed was Isiah. He said that at around noon he was in the bathroom and Layla was in her bedroom. He heard a man yelling and then heard his sister screaming. He got out of the bathroom and he saw a man with long gray hair running out the back door. He then called his stepmother and his father. Isiah walked into the kitchen to grab a knife in case there were more men in the house, and then he went looking for his sister. When he got to her room, he found the wall covered in blood and Layla beside her TV. Based on Isiah's version of events, the police started searching for a man with long gray hair and showed Isiah some mugshots. While the police were searching for a suspect, an autopsy was performed. The medical examiner concluded that Layla had been stabbed 20 times. 14 of the stab wounds were called prod injuries. They were shallow stabs, like she was being poked as a way to abuse her or intimidate her. The forensic unit noted that there was no blood between the bunk bed and where her body was found across the room beside the TV. They think that she was carried there very quickly or thrown from the bed across the room. The rest of the house was searched, and the police found a set of J.A. Henkel's serrated steak knives in the kitchen. The tip of one of them was bent. The knife didn't appear to have blood on it, but they dissected it, and traces of Layla's blood was found under the composite handle. 2 weeks later, the police announced that they had a suspect, 12-year-old Isiah. They said that he stabbed his sister, washed all the blood off himself and the knife, and then about 45 minutes after his sister was dead, he called his father and stepmother. This explains why Layla's body was cool when the paramedic touched her. The police said that they didn't find any evidence of anyone else being in the house that morning. They also said that the chances of someone breaking into the house in broad daylight on a Saturday is very unlikely. The main reason they suspected Isiah was because he was in the house when Layla was attacked. He used the knife from the kitchen and washed it afterwards. He also gave inconsistent statements to the 911 dispatcher and when talking to the police. Isiah went to trial in 2015. Isiah's lawyers said that he wouldn't have been able to wash all the blood off himself, especially his clothes. The crime scene was quite bloody, but Isiah only had a smear of blood from his right wrist to his right elbow. Layla's DNA was also found on a Ghostbusters shirt in Isiah's room. The shirt had a reddish stain on the back left shoulder and a discoloration near the abdomen. On the reddish stain, they found Layla's DNA. On the discoloration, they found a mix of Isiah's and Layla's DNA. So how did 12-year-old Isiah manage to clean himself so thoroughly? If he showered, there would have been traces of blood in the shower, but there were no traces of blood in the washroom at all. They even tested the pipes and found no traces of Layla's blood or cleaning supplies. As for the knife, the police think, but they are not 100% sure, that the steak knife is the murder weapon. Isiah's lawyers argue that the murder weapon was a different knife. They say that Layla's blood was on the knife, but it could have gone there at any time. They said the same thing about the DNA on Isiah's shirt. The tests only show the presence of the DNA and not when the DNA got there. His lawyers also say that there is DNA evidence that indicates someone else was in the house around the time that Layla was killed. During her autopsy, Layla was examined to see if she was sexually assaulted. She had not been sexually assaulted, but near her buttocks, the medical examiner found a strand of long brown hair. The hair belonged to Layla, but on the hair they found genetic material belonging to someone else. It was male DNA, and it did not belong to Isiah. In fact, it didn't belong to any members of the Fowler family. Isiah's lawyers say that this proves that someone else was in the house that day. The result of the trial is that Isiah, who was 15 at the time, was found guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to the maximum, which was 8 years. He will be released from prison around the age of 23. His family supports him and think he is innocent. They think that the person who killed 8-year-old Layla is still out there. Number 2. Susie and Roger Bailey. In June of 1969, Charles and Ruby Bailey of Parkersburg, West Virginia, had 13 children. 12 of the children lived with them in a tar paper house in a poor area of town. Charles and Ruby were also first cousins. Around 1 o'clock on the morning of June 8th, the fire department was called to their property. When the fire department arrived at the fire, the house was engulfed in flames, and they could hear family members inside screaming. There appeared to be only one person who made it out of the house. That was the grandfather, 63-year-old Obie Bailey, who was staying with the family. He climbed out of a window to safety, and when the fire department arrived at the home, they found Obie sitting on a chair watching the fire. At first, it was thought that Charles and Ruby, along with 12 of their children, who ranged in age from 17 to 5 months old, perished in the fire. Hours later, the authorities learned that 2 of the Bailey children weren't killed in the fire. 15-year-old Susie and 13-year-old Roger lived in a 2-bedroom building that was detached from the rest of the home. When the fire started, Susie and Roger ran to a nearby store and called Susie's boyfriend, 19-year-old John Baumgartner, to come pick them up. Baumgartner and Susie were first cousins. Baumgartner then took Susie and Roger to another relative's home. The fire marshal quickly determined that the cause of the fire was arson. There was an open gas can in the home, and there were several large places where the fire spread quickly. The first suspect was Obie. On the morning of the fire, some of the relatives were sitting around a table discussing why Obie might have started the fire. Then Roger supposedly spoke up and said he knew Obie didn't start the fire. He said that he and Susie splashed the gas around the home. Then they went outside, lit a piece of paper on fire, and then threw it through a broken window. When he was asked why they did it, he said it was because Susie was mad at their father. He had forced her to stop dating Baumgartner. When Susie was questioned, she also admitted to starting the fire. Both Susie and Roger were arrested and charged with 12 counts of murder 24 hours after the fire. In October, these charges were dismissed because the confessions were considered inadmissible. When they were interviewed by the police, neither Roger nor Susie, who were both minors, had attorneys present. By the time Susie was interviewed, she had been denied food and sleep for 24 hours. She also had an IQ level of around 71, so she had the mental capacity of a 10-year-old. Roger was taken in by a woman who lived in North Carolina. Susie was sent to live with a foster family in Ohio. She was given a new name, Laura Jean Boone, and her old records were destroyed. Susie was constantly in trouble for having young men in her foster family's home while her guardians were at work. She also ran away several times. At least once she ran away to be with Baumgartner. Then in June 1971, she was committed to a psychiatric hospital in Athens, Ohio. She spent 6 weeks in the hospital and then ran away. She stopped in to visit her brother in North Carolina, but where she went afterwards is unclear. In October 1971, Susie sent letters to her brother and her older sister that didn't live in the house at the time of the fire. In the letter, she said she had gotten married and she was moving to the Northeast. Her family doesn't know where she went, and her current whereabouts are unknown. Number 1. Zachary Witman. On October 2nd, 1998, 15-year-old Zachary Witman of New Freedom, Pennsylvania, stayed home from school because he was sick. His parents went to work, and his younger brother, 13-year-old Gregory Witman, went to school. At 3:06 p.m., Gregory got off the bus and headed towards home. Zachary had left the key in the lock in the front door so that Gregory could let himself in. At 3:09, a friend of Gregory's called the Witman house. The friend knew that there were at least 2 phones in the home, and they made different noises when they were picked up. This call was answered on the downstairs phone. Whoever picked up the phone hung it up immediately without saying anything. Gregory arrived home at 3:10. At 3:15, the friend called again. Zachary answered the phone that was on the second floor of the home. He said that he didn't think that Gregory was home yet, and he hung up the phone. The friend said that Zachary sounded fine, and she noticed nothing unusual about him. At 3:17, Zachary called 911. These are clips from the actual call.
Listen to me. Is he breathing?
No.
He's not breathing?
No.
All right, stay on the phone with me a minute.
Come on. I gotta call my mom.
Okay, you need to stay on the phone with me for now, okay?
I gotta call my
No,
mom.
you need to stay on the phone with me.
Okay. Come on.
Hey, what's your name?
I'm Zach.
Your name is Zach? Your
Yeah.
last name?
Whitman.
Whitman.
Yeah.
Okay.
I gotta call my mom. She's
Okay,
at work.
what's your phone number there, Zach?
7929-235-79. I hear him.
Okay, they're on their way. I'm going to go ahead and hang up with you.
Okay.
You're sure there's nobody else around?
I don't see anyone. I don't see anyone. I didn't look. I don't want to look. I don't want to look.
Listen to me a minute. Okay, you say you were upstairs and you heard a bang and that's it.
Not a bang. It's
Not
like,
a bang, you heard a loud noise.
Just like suffering almost, like rustling around. Yeah. And then I come downstairs and the door's cracked and just lying there. Just lying there.
Paramedics arrived at the home 7 minutes later. The police arrived not long afterwards. As the police searched the home, Zachary was outside screaming that he needed to call his mother. A paramedic found Gregory's body in the laundry room. It was clear that he had been stabbed dozens of times and he was nearly decapitated. The detective then stepped outside to interview Zachary. He had some blood on his hands, his shirt, and blood on the bottom of his socks. There was also blood on the cordless phone that he used to call 911. The police asked him what happened, and Zachary said that he was upstairs in his parents' bed. He answered the phone on the second floor when Gregory's friend called the second time. After hanging up, he heard what he thought sounded like Gregory wrestling with one of his friends. He went to the staircase and he saw a lot of blood and a broken table at the bottom of the staircase in the front foyer. He went down the stairs and walked to the laundry room where he found Gregory's body, and then he called 911. Just after midnight, the police sprayed luminol, a chemical that reacts to blood, around the Witman property. They found blood trails leading throughout the first floor of the home. They found one trail that led to the back door, but there was no blood on the back door itself. Outside, at the side of the house, luminol lit up a mound of dirt beside the family's hot tub. Buried in the dirt was a pair of soccer goalie gloves and a 1 3/4 inch penknife. An autopsy was performed and Gregory had been stabbed over 100 times. 65 of the wounds were to his neck, and this nearly caused his decapitation. The knife found buried beside the hot tub was consistent with the wounds. The police concluded that Zachary ambushed his brother with the knife in the foyer of the home after he walked in the front door. He came up behind him and slit his throat. He threw Gregory into the side table, breaking it. He then carried Gregory through the dining room, through the kitchen, to the laundry room that was near the back of the home. After nearly decapitating his brother, he ran through the house, out the back door, around to the side to the hot tub, and buried the gloves and the knife. He then answered the call from Gregory's friend when she called the second time, and then he called 911. 8 days after Gregory was killed, Zachary was charged with first-degree murder. Zachary and Gregory's parents hired a lawyer named Cristina Gutierrez. The result of the trial was that Gregory was found guilty. Even though he was 15 at the time of the murder, Zachary was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. His parents still believe that he is innocent, and over the years several experts have suggested that the case should be re-examined. The first aspect of the case that is questionable is the timeline. Gregory arrived home at 3:10, his friend called at 3:15, and Zachary supposedly answered the phone that was upstairs. Zachary called 911 at 3:17, and he stayed on the line till 3:24 when the paramedics arrived on the scene. That gives Zachary about 7 to 7.5 minutes to stab his brother over 100 times, run out the back door to the side of the house, bury the evidence, go back inside, go upstairs and answer the phone, and then call 911. Is 7.5 minutes enough time to do all that? If someone else killed Gregory, they had the time between when Gregory got home and when the paramedics arrived, which is about 14 uninterrupted minutes to kill Gregory, bury the evidence, and flee. Also, if Zachary did kill his brother, why did he call 911 so quickly after the stabbing? Zachary said he had blood on his shirt from trying to help his brother. If he killed his brother, why wouldn't he have changed out of his clothes before he called 911? Another problem is that when Gregory's friend called at 3:15, she didn't notice anything out of the ordinary about Zachary. Notably, he didn't sound like he was out of breath. Stabbing someone over 100 times would take several minutes and most likely leave the killer winded. Secondly, there were no traces of blood on the second floor of the home. That means whoever killed Gregory didn't go upstairs after the murder. If Zachary really did answer the second phone call that came in at 3:15 on the second floor phone, then he couldn't have been the one who stabbed his brother. Besides the timeline, some experts had several problems with the murder weapon. The first is that the knife is pretty flimsy. Could a 15-year-old have used this knife to nearly decapitate someone in under 7 minutes? According to one expert who specializes in knives, the neck is pretty difficult to cut through with any knife, let alone to do it in under 7 minutes. Also, could the knife withstand that type of attack without being bent or even broken? The expert thinks that the knife was used in the murder, but it wasn't the primary knife. If the penknife was used in the murder, the killer probably would have cuts on their hands because the knife would have probably slipped down on the killer's hand because the knife doesn't have any grips or a guard. Also, the blood would have made the knife slippery. Zachary's hands had no new cuts or scratches on them. If Zachary wore the gloves, there probably would be cuts on them, but there weren't. The last problem with the case is that there was no motive. The brothers seemed close and no one saw any animosity between the boys. Just before Gregory was killed, Zachary built him a soccer net. Another problem that Zachary faced when he went to court was his lawyer, Christina Gutierrez. Gutierrez will be familiar to people who listened to the first season of NPR's podcast, Serial. She was the lawyer of Adnan Syed, the subject of the podcast. For most of her career, Gutierrez had an excellent reputation. However, starting in the mid-1990s, several of Gutierrez's clients, including the Witmans, noticed her acting oddly. She would ask the Witmans and several other clients for thousands of dollars and say it was to pay expert witnesses. She was also supposed to hold money in trust funds. It turned out that Gutierrez just kept the money instead. In Zachary Witman's case, she also didn't file motions, and when she did, many of them were late. In 2001, a record number of people filed complaints against Gutierrez. The complaints were filed just after she spent months in the hospital. She had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She agreed to be disbarred instead of fighting the charges. In total, 28 claims against Gutierrez were paid out. This included the Witmans. The Witmans said that Gutierrez's ineffective counsel ensured that their son was found guilty. Gutierrez died in 2014. Zachary has always denied killing his brother, and his parents support him. They visit Zachary almost every week in prison. They still live in the same house where Gregory was murdered. The chief deputy prosecutor says that he is sure that Zachary is guilty, but says he is sympathetic to the family. He said that based on the tragic circumstances where one son murdered the other one and is serving a life sentence without parole, that they need to believe that Zachary is innocent just as a way to go on with their lives. He said that they manufacture reasonable doubt to sustain themselves. In 2012, the United States Supreme Court ruled that sentencing a person under the age of 18 to life without parole was unconstitutional. In 2016, it was made clear that the ruling was retroactive. So whether Zachary killed his brother Gregory or not, someday he'll get a chance at being free. Thanks a lot for watching today's video. Hopefully you found it interesting. If you did, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. We post a new video every Thursday and Sunday. If you already do subscribe, thank you so much for doing so. You can also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. We may even follow you back. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.